faster, healthier, better.
Hey, Leona, thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
You're a pretty great suggestion from Mayor Tom. So he said, you got to bring her on the podcast. I'm like, okay.
I know, and I saw his interview, and that was awesome.
It was funny. We teased him a little bit that he's a little bit of a celebrity for us. So he was like kind of blushing a little bit. He's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you are.
He's kind of a bit of a celebrity mayor.
A little bit.
He definitely is.
He's very sweet the way he's constantly communicating with people and trying to make sure he's, everybody getting voice, their opinions and stuff like that. So.
And being a small business in the town of Aurora, he has been a fantastic support. So
I agree. How do you guys know? How do you know him?
So I know Mayor Maracas, or Tom, because of the line of work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do I own my own practice called Let's Talk Divorce Canada, where I am a divorce coach and a family law mediator, but I also do legal advocacy on the side. And so I've been part of a small little advocacy group, and we have been working together to get a bill passed, a private member bill passed in Parliament to be turned into a federal law. And I reached out to Mayor Maracas because I needed some help getting some MPs on board that were really hard to get hold of. And he literally jumped on it within a matter of days and had everything done.
That's awesome.
So he's been really, really, really supportive for not only social causes, but small businesses. And like I said, he's kind of a celebrity in town, but he's a very approachable mayor.
Super approachable, yeah. I'm going to pour us some Meiomi.
Meiomi, yes. So you reached out to me before the podcast and you asked me what my favorite drink was. So I would have to say 3 out of 4 seasons, I will have a glass of Meiomi Pinot Noir.
All right. Well, I'm going to pour us a glass and my crew. And why don't you tell the camera and everybody else, how'd you get into this?
Okay. So I ended up getting into my line of work. It was sort of a mid-career change. Thank you.
No worries.
I had actually gone through my own divorce personally, and I had started the divorce process with legal counsel and didn't realize that it's really hard to see the process through from start to finish, especially if you're before the courts with legal counsel who bill an average of $300 to $600 per hour. So very quickly, I was financially exhausted and I was forced to self-represent. And through that process, I not only had to study the law, but I had to learn how to navigate the courts by myself up against legal counsel just so I could, go through the whole process of completing a divorce. But it was when I was in our court system and I was a self-represented litigant and I would have to wait in the filing room to file my court materials that I got talking to other people in the community. And I realized that the majority of people were self-represented. The majority of people couldn't afford legal counsel or started with legal counsel and like myself were financially exhausted. So I thought there's got to be a better way for the average Canadian to access our legal system to get a divorce without losing the shirt off their back. And so that's when I started just studying the law as a non-lawyer, but finding other ways that I could help to coach people through their divorce and coach people through their process. So my focus in the beginning was high conflict divorces before the courts. And yeah, it was really interesting. I had a full-time corporate job. I had a full-time career, but through word of mouth, people just heard that I was someone who had not only success representing myself in navigating the system, which is very rare, but that I just had really good coaching qualities for helping others. And so I started doing this indirectly, voluntarily on the side. And the next thing I know, word's getting out, I'm getting client referrals, and I kind of had this aha moment where I'm like, I could really turn this into something of significance. And so I made the change. I left my corporate job and literally went back to school. I went to York University. I took the family law mediation program. And then I went back to school and I did an online program through a school in the US called the CDC, which stands for the Certified Divorce Coach Certificate Program. And I just re-educated myself so I could actually turn what was sort of like a voluntary side hobby to help, local citizens into like a full-time practice. And since I made that decision, I have authentically had a full-time practice. I have a client base that I'm just continuing to grow.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers to that. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Let's try this out. That's pretty solid.
What does everyone think of Naomi?
You guys like it?
I need some feedback. Okay, we're getting thumbs up, nods. You haven't tried
Ryan,
it.
the camera guy, hasn't tried it yet. You like it?
But you approve.
It's actually delicious.
Good.
So because some people might ask, is there like, what's the difference between that and a mediator?
Okay, so that's a good question. So as a family law mediator, I'm typically a neutral third party working with both parties who are separating or divorcing. So I'm coming in as a neutral third party. I'm working with them on a voluntary basis, and they're typically somebody who's mediating wants to see a resolution. Both parties are typically pretty cooperative, and I'm just the neutral third party helping them to navigate. So as a divorce coach, I represent one side. And as a divorce coach, I work on higher conflict cases. So I would be working with, if it was a self-represented litigant, I would be working with the person one-on-one. If it was somebody who had counsel, they would work with myself and their counsel. And so my whole business model and the business model that I work with other law firms on is that when somebody's navigating a divorce, the 80-20 rule really applies in the sense that only about 20% of the work is actually legal or legal advice, but the other 80 is really just organizing your materials, getting yourself together and trying to be your best self during a major life upheaval and a major life transition. And that's where I come in. So I found this little sort of support niche where it's like, if you have legal counsel, but you're using them very strategically and clients work with me for the rest, it's like their support increases, but their overall cost decreases.
Okay, so that works out for them.
It not only works out for them, but it's more affordable for the average Canadian.
Yeah. So how much roughly does a divorce cost? Do you know the stats on that?
So it's really interesting. It really depends on the parties and the level of conflict. But if you saw my social media page, there's a really interesting stat on there that says that the wedding industry in Canada is a $5 billion industry, but the divorce industry is $10 billion.
Oh my gosh.
So, and they're really alarming stats that a lot of people don't think of before they step into marriage. But if these stats were more well known, would it change people's perspective? Would it make people really think twice first
before marrying?
You never know.
That's true. Do you find that divorce is still a little bit of a taboo? Or do you find it's the opposite where everybody gets divorced nowadays?
You know what's interesting? Well, we all know that our divorce rate is more than 50% for first marriages. It's more than 74% for second marriages, and it just continues upward from there. So am I saying don't get married? No. Am I against marriage? Not at all. But what I support is really going about it in the right way and really making sure that you align, because a lot of the cases I work on were individuals just in the line.
So what do you mean? Like, what are a couple of questions that you would ask these people? What do you mean by align?
Okay, well, I did a post the other day, and I thought it was a really neat post because it was just really important topics and questions to be cut. Sorry, do you guys have to edit?
Oh, it's okay. No, we're going to keep that actually.
We're just going to keep that going?
Here. So sorry, go on.
Okay, I wasn't sure what was going on there. So some questions would be, there's a lot of topics that people don't really discuss with one another before they get married. Have topics about, what are both of your views on finances? What are both of your views on saving? How to manage bills between you? What are your views on parenting if you want to have children? Are you aligned in terms of, your religion, your spirituality? With children, are you aligned in terms of education, discipline, all these different things? There's a lot of really interesting conversations that I think people shy away from because they think they're too hard or they could end the relationship, but they're actually really important points of discussion.
Well, those kind of conversations either are going to put you guys closer together or drift you apart, which is maybe a good thing, right? If you guys can have that conversation together.
Ideally, I think everyone should have that conversation before taking that step. They really should.
So what, if you don't mind me asking, now that you're a little bit more experienced with coaching and stuff like that, when you went through your divorce, is there a couple of things you wish you did differently?
I wish I had a divorce coach.
Yeah, you wish you had you.
I definitely, I wish there was a version of myself around at that time because I relied on legal counsel for everything. And that's a mistake a lot of people do. They will call their legal counsel for an hour and say, I had this horrible, experience with my ex-spouse today, not realizing that that's going to show up at the end of the month as a $500 additional expense in your legal bill, right? So it's, I wish I had that support in place. I wish I had that additional support, that additional knowledge, somebody that, I could talk to that could hold me accountable, much like a coach holds an athlete accountable. And you have to take next steps to get to that next level of success. I wish I'd had somebody coaching me and developing me and helping me grow and learn through the divorce process, which when I went through it at the time felt really overwhelming. And it was like a huge upheaval. So that's what I would have done differently. I would have had a coach and approached it differently. But at the same time, the difficult experience that I went through is why I'm here today.
Yeah,
and
so
why I'm
it was
doing
a
what I'm
happy
doing.
accident there. Yeah,
it was a happy accident, and I think it's a good example of sometimes you have to have gratitude for some of the challenges that life throws at you, because I'm a firm believer that life doesn't throw at you what you can't handle. And clearly, it threw me a really complicated divorce, and it threw me an opportunity where I was forced to learn the law. I was forced to discover a passion I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
So,
there, when we talked previously, there's something that you said that really clicked with me, and it's, you said you realized that you were working for significance. You want to work for significance opposed to success, right?
Yeah.
And when did that click in your head?
Well, it was interesting. When I was in the corporate world after my divorce, I was successful.
Do you mind me asking what you did?
So I was business to business sales.
Okay.
So I would travel a fair bit. I was always dealing with corporations. I was always selling, presenting. And so I was in business to business sales. And where I was successful at it, I didn't go home at the end of the night thinking that I had created change or that I was truly benefiting the people I was selling to. But when I started to do this coaching on the side, I would come home at night knowing that I'm doing a free coaching call for someone just out of the goodness of my heart to help them through their divorce. I would go into that call excited, and I would leave that call feeling rewarded because every time I spoke to that person, they were progressing more and more. They were getting their voice back. They were getting control of their life back. They were feeling confident. And that's where I started to recognize the difference between the success I was having in the corporate world, but the significant impact and significance this other avenue was having. And when I was in my I'm in my mid 40s now, but in my early 40s, I said, I'm at a stage in my life where it's I've done and accomplished so many things that now I want to do things that are significant, that are literally system changers. And that's where I started Let's Talk Divorce Canada.
I like that. So to put it back a little bit. So when you meet with somebody for divorce coaching, what are the initial questions that you ask them?
That I ask them? That's a really good question. I try to get a background on the family. I always say that every family is like a unique snowflake. There's no two that are completely alike. The circumstances are similar, but no two families are alike. So I really try to get a lot of background on the family and just where they're at in the process. Because some people reach out to me in the very early stages before they've told their partner that they're going to divorce.
Oh, really?
Or that they want to divorce. Some people reach out to me after they've been in the process for a year or two with counsel and really not progressed. So it really depends on the stage that the client's at, the questions that I ask. But, I like to get a lot of background on the divorce. Obviously, you need to get an idea of their budget so that you're using their time with you strategically. I need to find out, are they self-represented? Are they working with counsel? Are they working with counsel on a limited scope retainer, which is different than a full retainer? So these are all of the questions I sort of ask. And then from there, I let them know a little bit about how I can help them.
So, when they work with divorce attorneys and stuff like that, do you find that they're happy to work with you, or do you find that there's sometimes crashing some heads on some stuff?
That is a really good question. So I've actually been invited on a few occasions to be a guest speaker with the CBA, which is the Canadian Bar Association. And there's typically a Q&A at the end. And I would say the majority of lawyers who are very forward thinking in their practice and recognize that they have to tailor their service models to access more Canadians are really on board with working with a divorce coach.
Mhm.
But then you still get that old school, I call it kind of like that old school boys club, where they think you're stealing their business, but you're actually not stealing their business. If they were to look at it through a different lens, they would see that if they were to take a slightly different service model approach, that you could actually be helping them to expand their business. So it really depends on the individual that you're dealing with. But the firms that I do work with, I do repeat business with, we're constantly in communication about how we can collaborate better, more effectively. And I align with people who align with me.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Do you find that you predominantly work with females or males?
Another great question. I would say probably about 60-40 split. So 40 males, 60 females. It really depends on the time. But it's interesting. I'm finding
What do you mean by time?
Well, just what's going on, like who hears about me at times, the referral system, like who, a lot of my business is word of mouth. So it really depends on like who's referred me to who. I do find that women talk more. So women are more likely to refer a friend.
I agree.
So I think that that's why I typically have a little bit more female, but I do find that I'm working with men more because when they hear coaching, they kind of relate to, okay, I was coached on a hockey team. I've been coached on a baseball team at some point in life. Like I've had some level of coaching. And with coaching, men typically see a start of a season and an end of a season. So when you can sort of take that mentality into your divorce, like you're not going to feel like this forever. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is going to be an end to the season. They sort of have this aha moment where they're like, okay, I get it. And my male clients can be some of the most rewarding clients to work with.
Why is that?
It's interesting, but one of the stigmas that I still find, especially when it comes to like your mental health or self-awareness or bettering yourself, women, from what I've seen, are more than likely to talk to a therapist or go and get support or go and get help over men. There is still this mask of masculinity, this toxic masculinity that has to be overcome in our society. And I don't often see men voluntarily going out and getting help when they need it versus women. And so I find the work with men particularly rewarding just because I think it's ending that toxic masculinity stigma when men can reach out for help and realize it's okay. And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to have support during a difficult time. It's okay to share your feelings. It's okay to talk to someone. And I can end up being that support from like a non-therapist perspective.
I definitely can relate to that a little bit, because sometimes when people ask me, what's the predominant, do you have males or females as clients? And I actually, now it's evened out, but I had mostly females. And I think the reason why is because I find females are more willing to be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you help me out? And most of the time, men are either like, I'll look it up, or they just say, I know what to do.
I'll fix it myself.
I'll fix it myself. And then they end up progressing, like prolonging, like the process more than it should be, right?
100%.
And I agree with you 100% on like we need to change like asking for help, 100%, because
we need to change asking.
I can't remember the stat. I don't know if Ryan can look it up, but the stat on there's more suicides, I think, in males in the last 2-3 years than it is in females, but predominantly because they're too afraid to ask for help.
And if you look at when a lot of divorces happen, people are in their 40s and their 50s. And for the male population, and once again, I can't remember the exact age, but it's somewhere in the late 40s to 50s is also the highest percentage of males taking their life. Right? So, and you wonder sometimes if you were to really look deeper into that demographic, were they going through major life upheavals like a job loss or a divorce or family circumstances that led to that? And so that's why I really open up my practice to men and women. There's a lot of coaches in my profession who say that they only coach men, they only coach women.
Do you find that's a little bit problematic though?
I think it depends on every coach. I think has to have their own target market and their own niche. And so my niche is high conflict. That's my area of expertise, but I can work with anything below that. But I will coach people who are coachable. And it doesn't matter if you're male, female, it doesn't matter what, you identify as. If you are a coachable person, we can work together.
So you say high conflict, right? So are you able to give me a couple of examples of what high conflict?
So high conflict is typically anything that's before a court. And there can be degrees of conflict from there. But I would say anything that's before a court is a little bit more complex in the sense that you now get a sense that the parties are not communicating. They are predominantly communicating through counsel, or if they are communicating, their communication is very tense and there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of upset. And they are before the courts essentially letting a judge who doesn't know anything about them and their life make a decision for them. So that's what I put into more of a high conflict category. So I would say that's definitely my area of expertise, but I've had cases that I've worked on, whether I was mediating for a couple separating or working with someone one-on-one that were like, hey, we hear you're great. We hear that you helped a friend through a high conflict divorce, but we actually have low conflict. Can you help us? And I'm like, absolutely. So it doesn't mean I'm only going to take you on if you're high conflict, but I just have a particular area of expertise there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you find that stat right?
Yeah, it's for every 100,000 in Canada, population of 100,000, 20 male suicides and then 4 female suicides.
Wow, that's huge.
That's an alarming stat.
That's a huge
That's
stat.
a lot of men.
Yeah. I mean, over the pandemic, I know of 2 people who committed suicide.
Wow.
So, and there were males.
Wow.
That's my next question, actually. So, how busy have you been during the pandemic?
That is a great question. The pandemic was actually the life reset for me that threw me into this full time. And that's the gratitude that I have for this pandemic. That's the gratitude that I have for all of these lockdowns that weren't easy for us to navigate. Was that for me, being an extrovert by nature and being someone who needs to be around people, I was now doing Zoom classes and upgrading my skills so that I still felt a part of something, and upgrading myself and re-educating myself and taking those next steps was really what drove me to do this full time and to open up my own practice. And so, you know, it was great in that sense. But then what also came with the pandemic was just a wave of, oops, a bug just went in my eye, separations and divorces. So if people were already in a situation where they were like, you know, hey, our marriage is having issues and we're struggling, but maybe they had that escape of like going to work and getting that break from each other every day or having their social outlets. Now, when they're locked down with that person, you know, therapists didn't even know how to navigate COVID at the start and had to go to an online platform. And so mental health services were down for a while and a variety of other services like couples counseling. And so I think that some people who are already struggling, it maybe pushed them to the point of like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Right. And to move on.
I know one of my clients divorced during the pandemic, and it's a similar situation that you just said.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I just want to take a quick second to say thank you to our sponsors. So our sponsors are Neurodose.ca. They have CBD pills. I like taking the CBD pills after a hard workout, or honestly, if I need to get a better sleep. You also have their microdosing kit, the liquid, which is a 1P LSD. It helps me with a little bit with productivity. Especially when I do martial arts, I feel a little bit more coordinated in that sense. They also have the psilocybin pills. It lasts about 3 to 6 hours, so you can definitely take it midday. The way I kind of suggest it, or the way I say that it helps out the most, is that I feel like I'm playing chess while everybody's playing checkers. Neurodose.ca, our discount code is GetOff15, but they also have a facility called Floatvalley, located in Markham, Ontario. Kind of a game changer when it comes to recovery. They have infrared saunas, they have a float tank, they have ice baths, and they're working on getting a couple of new things too. Go to floatvalley.com to kind of book. It is GetOff15, again, our discount code. Other than that, enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Actually, the crew actually made a good point. Have you ever kind of coached somebody and they decide not to divorce and to actually stay together?
I have. So
tell me about that.
You know what's interesting? Yes. So one of the questions I have is, so if you're a divorce coach, you must promote divorce. And the question is, no, I promote the best interest of my client. I promote my client to be their best self. And yes, I have coached clients who started out with me early before they even suggested to their other spouse that they were thinking of divorcing. But just through coaching, realized that maybe they were in a position where they could work this out.
And did you bring this to them, like, hey, maybe this can work out? Or
I
how did it work out?
I never give advice when I'm coaching someone. It's giving them the tools so that they can make their own decision with the proper tools in place. So yeah, not everybody necessarily divorces.
How many of those instances did you have?
I would say that more lead to separation and divorce than not, because most clients are coming to me after they've had that conversation with their spouse and everything's already progressed. But some people that come proactively, yeah. Yeah.
What is one of the hardest cases that you've had? If you can speak as much as you can about it.
Yeah, I can speak from a perspective of not having names, but I think one of the most complicated cases that I worked on actually ended this past year. And it was a marriage. It was a very short-term marriage. But the individual, and I actually did a post on my social media about this, and this case in particular reminded me of the Netflix series Dirty John. Has anyone seen Dirty John?
Have you guys watch it?
Okay.
Stacey's like, yeah, I've seen it.
She's nodding. Okay.
I have not seen it.
So
what's it about?
So really interesting. So if you watch, I believe it was season 1 of Dirty John.
Okay.
This case was very much like season 1.
Okay.
So this individual portrayed himself as being a certain person, a certain name, a certain persona.
It's always a guy. It's always a guy.
Yeah, it was the guy. I hate to say it. It was the guy. They met on an online dating app. They fell in love. They were married a few years later. And then right at the 2-year mark, he said, I want a divorce. He had, of course, targeted a woman who was successful, had her own home, and he really didn't have any assets. And it turned out that something just smelled a little fishy with this case. I said, something's not quite right. So we did the work to really dig into this person's background, found out that they had had multiple names, and they had actually had a series of multiple names, a series of short marriages across Canada targeting the same types of women, where they would divorce and after 2 years try to take them for half of everything. So this guy, we ended up getting his criminal records. We ended up getting his jail time records.
So how did you go about that? Like, do you just research it? Do you ask people for some favors? What do you do?
How do I say this? Favors?
Favors.
Would it be favors? Would it be favors? Yeah. There's always legal counsel that you work with always has ways to go about obtaining information. And it reminded me of the Netflix series Dirty John. It was someone who had presented themselves in a false manner to essentially land a successful woman for their own financial gain. And when we were able to put a case together and make this guy run for the hills, it was really nice to see that another woman hadn't been taken advantage of in this way. So that was probably the most complicated case I worked on, but those are the cases that I excel in. And that's why I say that I have this niche in high conflict. So I would put that in a high conflict category.
That's very high conflict.
It's very high conflict.
Yeah.
It's very unusual. It's not your typical divorce, but it happens. And it happens more frequently than people think.
Do you ever get people who realize maybe they're, gay or lesbian, and it kind of gets a little bit more dicey with that too? And how do you handle that situation?
You know what? So I've had a handful of cases where lengthy marriages, one partner, I guess, came out and either said, I actually like men, I actually like women. They entered into a marriage because they weren't comfortable coming out, but we now live in a day and age where people are starting to feel safer to be their authentic self, and they feel safer coming out with these things. And I would have to say those separations and divorces are some of the most beautiful human experiences, because what's unique about them is that you have two people that are separating and divorcing, not because they don't love and respect each other, but because someone has to be true to their sexuality.
But do you find that sometimes it can be a double-edged sword, because you want them to be happy, the person, but at the same time, I'm sure if it's a male or female, you think, you wasted my time. We have kids or not kids, or maybe I'm pregnant, or like, how could you do that? Are you even attracted to me? Like you want them to be happy, but at the same time, how can you not be angry with them?
And
so how do you resolve that?
There's a lot of questions that come about for the party who's being left behind.
Yes.
Versus the party who's moving on. And a lot of those questions are the ones that you just touched on. It's, was it something I did? Did I, I was working on a case where it was the man who decided that he liked other men.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman said, was it something I did? Was I not attractive enough? Like really went internally and thought that it was her fault.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where coaching can be a really good process. And don't get me wrong, like there was definitely therapists and other professionals involved in that
Mm-hmm.
case. But it's a different kind of sort of empathy and awareness
Mm-hmm.
and a different approach you have to take to coaching situations like that, because they do have different dynamics and different sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different questions for the person being left behind in the process than it is in a traditional. And I don't even want to say traditional because I don't even think that's the case anymore. But it's different in the sense that, you know, there are those feelings of like, did you waste my time? Could I have had a life with somebody else? But, you know, they really truly did love each other and they really truly did have an experience at that time. And so those are the ones that are really interesting to navigate and to see both parties come out having empathy and respect for each other
Mm-hmm.
in the end and realizing that they can still be friends and that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to say, like, we don't have exes. Like, I hate the term like exes and my ex wasted my time and my ex did this to me and my ex did that to me.
Why is that?
Because I don't think they're exes. I think they're examples. They're examples that we live in life. They're examples of, you know, maybe what we would do again, what we wouldn't do again, what we would do differently.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't evolve and grow without examples
Mm-hmm.
in everything in life.
So you just say I have a lot of examples in my life.
I don't have a lot of examples.
I'm
in
not
my
talking about
life.
you per se.
Okay.
You could just say, hey, I have a lot of examples in life.
Let's just clarify. What are we talking about by a lot of examples? But I think we all have examples.
We definitely
I think
do.
we all have examples
definitely
that
do.
get us to where we are today.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So have you ever had a case where it's both of them that wanted to come out, but like
No, I haven't.
I've heard some crazy cases like that.
Mhm.
So it can get a little complicated.
It can get a little complicated, but what I'm noticing is that when you do work on cases like that,
Mhm.
there's not a lot of resources out there. And so I would really
Mhm.
like to see the resource base for professionals like myself and even people navigating those dynamics to really increase. Because when you go and look online, like in the divorce world, it's like narcissist is used every other sentence. So if you want to look up divorcing a narcissist or anything about a narcissist, there's an endless amount of articles on the internet.
Yeah.
But if you want to look up, you know, separation and divorce, because, you know, one party is coming out with their sexuality, there's not a lot of information on how to navigate that, not only as two individuals,
little
but with
new
children
too,
and
right?
family. It's still really new. So I'm looking forward to working on more of those cases, expanding my knowledge on those cases, working with other professionals on those cases, because I think they're so important because we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
It's a human case. It's really
Do you-
different.
Do you ever have you ever worked with somebody who's like, girl, I want to take him for everything? I want to be a little vengeful? Or a guy?
Yeah. You know what? And those are some great people to coach.
Mm-hmm. And how would you kind of talk to them with that? You're like, okay.
I think a lot of it, yeah. You know, I have had cases where I recognize that some people aren't coachable.
Mhm.
If some people are too extreme in that direction
Mhm.
and too vengeful, that's not someone who I think is really coachable.
So do you break apart from them, or do you suggest, hey, maybe this is not working? How do you go about that? Or you
it's
try to
sort of-
make it
It's
work?
sort of like any coaching relationship,
Mhm.
right? If you recognize that there's something not working in the dynamic, I do have an out clause in my contract.
Mhm.
And clients have an out clause, and sometimes it's okay to say, you know, we're not a fit.
Mhm.
Not
It's
everybody's a
working out.
fit,
Mhm.
right? It's rare. Has it happened? Absolutely. If I think somebody is truly not coachable and truly not wanting to aspire to be their best self during that
Mhm.
time, I'll have that conversation with them and say, hey, we've had X number of sessions together. You spent this much money, but really, like, you're not taking those next steps. You're not being accountable to me for those next steps. So, you know, where you want to go with this,
Mhm.
right? And if that's the case, there's no point in wasting the time.
So as a divorce coach, and you've seen divorces or maybe
Mhm.
people coming together so long, do you find that it kind of changes your mind about divorce for you personally?
For me personally, great question.
Like, would you get married again? Are you married?
No.
Are you single? Fellas. Okay, so but what's your opinion on that? Has it changed throughout the years? Or it's just
Yeah, you know, I always had the opinion, even growing up as a child, I always thought this whole marriage thing's a little silly. Like, why do people have to have a ring on their finger? Like, why does everybody have to follow suit with these societal, family, religious, spiritual expectations? So I think I was always a little bit outside of the box in the sense that I always believed that people could have a genuine connection and commitment without that. But I also respect people that want to have that formal commitment. I really think it's up to the individual themselves. I know I'm kind of dodging the question, but to get back to myself, because you were asking if it's changed me, I would say it's changed what I would have to have with someone to be convinced enough that I would do it again.
Fair enough.
I would have to be really and truly aligned with that person. Have I found that yet? No. Do I think it's possible? Yes. But I wouldn't necessarily have to get married again. I think it's really up to when you're with the right person, what works best for both of us. And you'll decide that when the time comes. So I guess I can't really say yes or no.
That's okay. You don't have to say yes or no. I was just curious.
Yeah.
What's the youngest couple that you've coached through?
30s.
30s?
In their 30s.
And they just had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Typically, if they were in their 30s, they probably got married in their early 20s. And the 20s is such a time of transition and change for individuals.
Oh, 100%. I'm like not the same person I was when I was 25, nor 20. Like,
and I don't even know your age. So,
how do I look?
Oh boy. Do we have to play this game?
Yes, we do.
I feel like, oh geez, I feel like I'm at Canada's Wonderland. Am I going to get a big stuffy?
Yeah.
You get a little bit more.
Okay, I get some more Naomi. 32-ish?
31. But I'm turning 32 soon.
Oh,
You're pretty close though.
That was good.
Hey.
That's
not bad.
I'm not going to ask you the same question because that is a really bad position.
And honestly, I would just, let's pour some more here.
Amazing.
Would you like
Thank
some more?
you. Sure, I'll take some more.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I would say
do you guys want any more?
a lot of people
No?
transition and change in their 20s.
Yeah.
Because you go from moving out of your parents' home, going to school for the first time, figuring out a career, figuring out your life, your social circles, your relationships. There's so many moving parts in your 20s that a lot of the couples that I've divorced got together in their early 20s and just found that they deviated in different directions and never kind of aligned again and had struggles in their marriage as a result. So I say kudos to individuals who kind of work through that phase and allow themselves to have those years that you never really get back and not to feel rushed and to take your time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
What about your oldest people that you've worked with?
Oldest people are typically those who are getting to the point of retirement and then saying, not sure if I want to spend my whole day with that person.
Isn't that crazy? After retirement, you're like, you know what? No.
We've worked so hard towards everything and now we're retired. So why don't you take the house and I'll take the cottage and we'll just be fine.
Yeah.
So I see a little bit of that.
What's the longest case that you've worked for?
Probably 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
The average court case is 3 years.
Is it?
The average court case from start to finish.
So much can happen in 3 years.
Yeah. And then you put COVID into the mix and that slowed a lot of stuff down.
So in what way did that slow things down?
The courts had to reinvent the wheel. They had to figure out how to do online court. Because you have to remember, like when we first got shut down, what was it, March 16th, 2020? It was supposed to be 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Yeah,
so I ended up thinking back then it's kind of like the whole world was given a 2-week March break. This is
kind of
interesting, right? Yeah. This is interesting, but I think we all initially really thought it would only be 2 weeks. Then when it progressed and we all started to understand the impact of COVID, the court had to kind of find a way to still support all the cases that are before the courts. And so that's when they moved to this Zoom platform. But they were, backlogged and they're still playing catch up. So I know for a lot of people and a lot of the clients I work with, it slowed things down a bit. 3 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And what about your shortest?
Shortest? I mediated a couple from start to finish in 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
In 2 weeks.
Damn, you're good at your job.
Yeah,
2 weeks?
In 2 weeks. So they had been working with, they each had lawyers. They were fighting back and forth with legal counsel for months on end. They got referred to me as a mediator. I had multiple sessions with them over a period of 2 weeks. Our last Zoom call, I was on with them. They each had a glass of wine and they cheersed each other. It wasn't, but
This is the game changer right
you
here.
know what? I need to reach out to Naomi and see if maybe I can, I don't know, get
a little sponsor.
A little sponsor
That's
or
not bad.
something. A little sponsor, yeah. It was 2 weeks and they cheersed each other over a glass of wine and they just said, thank you so much for helping us through this. Because I think that they felt, and I don't want to paint legal counsel in a negative light, but I think that they felt that maybe there is some fuel being added to the flame.
Okay.
Where I always say that I'm the person who I don't want to put fuel on the flame. I'm trying to get the embers out, right? So
that's not bad.
Yeah.
So I want to take it back a little bit back to the bill that you want to get passed.
Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit more in depth on what that is and how it's going to help people in the long run?
So there was a devastating situation that happened back in February of 2020.
Okay.
It was all over the news, so you may have seen it on like CBC. But there was a young girl by the name of Kira who had a very abusive father, and the mother was before the court system trying to fight for protecting their daughter from the dad, who had some severe mental health issues. A judge ultimately put the 4-year-old back in her father's care, and it was a murder-suicide. He jumped off Rattlesnake Point off a cliff, and a murder-suicide holding his daughter. So I ended up getting connected with Jennifer Kagan, the mother who lost her daughter and who was fighting for her safety. And we started working with a group, and we started an advocacy group. And the bill that we've been all working to get passed is Bill C-233, and it's called Kira's Law. And the reason that this bill is so incredibly important is because a lot of people, unless you've been through the system or work in the system, they don't realize that a lot of the judges before the courts in family law, like running the family law courts, actually don't have a background in family law. They may have formerly been criminal lawyers, civil lawyers, a variety of different areas. There are some who have family law backgrounds, but the majority of them have no knowledge in family law. So they could get appointed as a judge on a Friday and be in a family law court making life-changing decisions that following Monday with no training and no background. So what we're trying to do is ensure that they have that proper training, not only in family law, but also in domestic abuse and coercive control, so they can start to see the signs if abuse could be present in a case, so that those victims of abuse can be protected, because they're seeking protection from the court system, but our court system is too often failing them. And I always say that our court system needs to start operating more like a business. Like, you wouldn't run a factory, like Amazon wouldn't run a factory with forklift workers and not train them how to drive a forklift. When there's hundreds of people around that a person going rogue with a forklift could injure or damage. Yet we have judges in our court system making life-altering decisions every single day without any knowledge or expertise, because there's no training offered within the system.
What do you think that training should look like?
So our group is working on first getting this bill passed, and then working, obviously, would be on a deeper level for like what the training should be. And that won't be my area. I'm more the advocacy standpoint, and getting the support of MPs. But there would be essentially a full training program, so that judges wouldn't sit on the stand, and it would be put into federal law, so that they actually can't practice until they're fully trained.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so how close are we to getting this passed? How can we help?
Kira's Law went for its third reading before the House of Commons, and it got 100% yes vote.
Oh, this is amazing then.
As a private member's bill, which is really, really huge. So we're just waiting to hear.
That's not bad.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. And I have to say, our local mayor, he stood behind that bill. So you may have seen on my social media posts that he actually brought this bill forward to the town council, and they did a motion on it where the town voted 100% in support of this bill. So
that's
I
amazing.
thought that was
That's
really
beautiful.
awesome. Yeah.
So what kind of people do you look up to when it comes to coaching and having great communication with people?
Oh my goodness. Who do I look up to in terms of good communication? Funny enough, there's like podcasts that I listen to that
Which
I
ones?
find like really uplifting and really inspiring. Lewis Howes, are you familiar with him?
No.
So I actually ended up first discovering Lewis Howes when I read a book of his, and it's, I believe, I'm trying to remember the title. It's like The Masks of Masculinity. And every single chapter was to do with masks that men wear.
Mhm.
And ultimately the book was about, men being able to reach out for help and recognize when they need help and to not live behind this mask. And,
Mhm.
he had these different masks, like the stoic mask or the athlete, the guy who always hides behind an athlete bravado and feels
Mhm.
like he has to be a tough guy. And I read that book actually back when I was in the corporate world and I was dealing with so many men. I was in a predominant field with men over women.
And you felt that helped you out dealing with them or
I felt
communicating
that
with them a little bit?
it kind of coached me how to deal with men in the corporate world a bit better. And then I started listening to his podcast and he just always had like some of the most incredible interviews.
Mhm.
And I almost felt like listening to those interviews was sort of like coaching me to be better, coaching me to navigate my life to a point of significance, and was probably part of the inspiration as to, why I even decided to go on my own and do my own coaching.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
To speak a little bit on the mask part, there's a saying that I heard about men, and it's similar to what you just said. And it's like men have the mask that they wear when they're at work, the mask they wear in front of their wife or significant other, and the mask that they wear in front of people, and then who they are like when they're alone. And they're all so different, right?
And they're all so different.
And it's sad because it's like, obviously you need to be a certain professionalism, a certain person sometimes in situations, but to have so many masks to be so lost can cause a lot of heartache, a lot of depression.
Well, I think so because, I think growing up as a female, if I was a child and I cried, I was never told girls don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember seeing boys cry and their parents going, boys don't cry. Boys are tough.
Yeah.
Boys are this. And so I feel for men because I feel like a lot of those masks come from this belief system of how men have to be over women. But really, we're all human and we all have to be our human authentic selves. And I think that if we remove those stereotypes that, we can actually kind of open up and have better conversations. I
agree with you. To add a little bit to that too, I have a client who she loves training because she says when she's at work, she's that person for work. When she's at home, she's the wife. And then when her kids are home, she's a mother. And she's like, when I'm here, I'm me. Yeah. And it's crazy when you hear about that because you're like, a part of you is like so heartbroken because you're like, I just want you to be you.
Yeah.
And for some people out there in the world, they don't have that opportunity. And it doesn't have to be just personal training. Yeah. But it can be like somebody doesn't have their own thing that is theirs to be who they are. Right. And it can be for females and males. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But I just find for males there's a bravado.
There's a lot more bravado, a lot more ego. And it's a shame. It's a shame, but I see that changing. And you know what? There's still bravado and ego for women too. I don't think social media has helped.
Why not?
I think your social media is fantastic. I think that there's a lot of people sending out positive messages, but I also think that there's a lot of people on social media sending out unrealistic messages.
Like what?
Oh, when you look at, body type.
100%.
What are these? I learned the other day, I was like, why do all these women on Instagram have these like big booties? And I didn't realize that they're
in right now.
No, they're actually like putting inserts in there. And I'm like,
that's crazy.
Putting inserts in and trying to be like something that they're not because one person did it, so another person has to do it. And I just think like the body image for men and women and a lot of these things, I think that it can have a really toxic element to it because somebody could be seeing that thinking that that's the norm and that they're not built right when they actually are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There's a certain problem with social media because there's so much free information out there, good information out there, people who just want to share knowledge. But at the same time, there's so many people out there who you don't know what kind of cosmetic done they have, right? You don't know how many filters they have on, how much they've like dieted themselves to look a certain point.
How much filler they have, how
filler.
much Botox.
And it's the same for men. Like a lot of men, they perceive themselves to be a certain amount and then maybe they're a little bit enhanced in certain situations. Yeah. And
or even basic abs now where you can like add abs that you don't have.
I know, it's unreal.
I was like learning all about this.
There's filters for abs.
I was
a little shading.
You mean I could have had abs this whole time?
Yeah, no, I know. It's crazy. And it's so toxic.
It's so toxic.
And you scroll and you realize like subconsciously how they're just trying to get you more addicted to social media.
And it's funny, but that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about when they're going through divorce. When you want downtime, try to stay away from that.
Yeah.
Try to read a book, try to go outside, get some fresh air, see the trees, feel, touch, smell things around you. Try to stay off your social media because especially when you're going through a major life upheaval, it can make you feel even worse.
I agree with you.
Yeah, especially when you see like things popping up like happy families or marriages. Or
You're like,
things
son of a
that.
bitch,
Like,
come on.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on?
Yeah, yeah.
So where's the best place for them to reach you or look at your social media?
Yeah. So on Instagram, my social media handle is Let's Talk Divorce Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And my website is www.letstalkdivorcecanada.com.
It's very simple. I like it.
It's really simple.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being on.
Thank you for having me on.
And,
I appreciate you for having me.
Oh, no, you're amazing. And I appreciate the wine.
Great. I'm glad you like it. I hope this becomes a new favorite in your household.
I think it will.
Good. And in everybody else's household. Amazing.
Awesome. Well, cheers. Have a good day.
You too.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.